Thank you so much for coming to the second portion. So my name is Christy Lee, and I am a junior sociology major. And right now we'd like to welcome 5 of our returning alums for the Alumnae panel, and they are Fiona Almeida, Charlotte Ashamu, Lily Marcellin, Catherine Jenkins, and lastly, Roby Matini. And also right now, we'd like to read 2 compliments from alums who were not able to make it here today, but wanted to send in their congratulations to Professor Steady. And the first one is by Phoebe Handler. Okay. Dr. Steady, it is so wonderful to hear from you. Congratulations on your upcoming retirement. I am so humbled and honored to be invited to participate in this symposium, but I will unfortunately be traveling for a family obligation that day. I'm so sorry to miss this event. I remember your environmental justice class so fondly and think of the material and the concepts it covered regularly. After Wellesley, I went back to school to earn a Bachelor of Science in Nursing and began working as a nurse in a neonatal intensive care unit. This past year, I earned my Master's of Science in Nursing and am now practicing as a neonatal nurse practitioner at the Women's and Children's Hospitals in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I think often of the systematic and personal, social, and environmental injustices that play a role in many of the health sequelae that lead to the preterm births and congenital anomalies that I see on a daily basis in my clinical practice. I often consider how I can go on to start to address some of the basic issues in the perinatal area, and know so much of my interest in this topic was stroked by your guidance in the environmental justice course. I wish you a happy and full retirement. You will be greatly missed in the Wellesley academic community. You've touched so many with your thoughts, teachings, and kindness. All the best, Phoebe Handler. And the second and last compliment is by Rabbi Heather Miller, also an alum. She says, "Wow, Professor Steady, it is amazing that it's time for you to retire. I hope you look back on your life and legacy with great pride in remembering the large scope of your work and remembering each of us grateful alumni /I who have benefited from your incredible research, teaching prowess, and care, nurturing us do the work and staying motivated in the movement. I'm so glad to see 2 former students who I consider personal friends, Charlotte and Catherine, in the program to honor you with their words at the symposium. Though I cannot attend, I am no less enthusiastic about sending you a fond farewell and many, many thanks. You have done a great service at Wellesley College, and I wish you continue your impact in whatever way fills your spirit in the days, weeks, months, and years to come. Fondly, Rabbi Heather Miller."
It is my pleasure to chair today's panel and to be present and to honor Professor Steady, her invaluable contributions to women's roles in the development of their respective societies. I had the privilege to also work with Professor Steady at the Africana Studies department when I was a student here at Wellesley. During my time in the department, I observed many wonderful aspects of Professor Steady, some of which I remember very fondly. She always walked into the department with her pleasant smile every time she got past a class. She was very observant. I remember she always checking to make sure if her movies came in for her next class. She made time for her students, guests that visited the Africana Studies department, and always welcomed alum. Also, I learned from Professor Steady about her ability to remain consistent, respond to all things promptly, and always has a sense of fashion. Professor Steady always wore some piece of clothing or accessory that was very, very tasteful. And it's something I admire very much about Professor Steady, among all the other things that people have mentioned today. Because of time, I'm going to keep this really short. So I want to welcome our panelists for today. And I will give a short introduction to each of our panelists. And if you'd like to read more about them, their bios are in your programs. They are all doing fantastic work, and I'm really excited to be part of this this afternoon and to honor Professor Steady. They will have about 15 minutes each to speak, and I will be their timekeeper. So I ask for all of you to hold your questions until the end of the session. And if time allows, we'll try to also maybe connect the last panel's questions as well so that they can have an opportunity to respond. Yeah?
Good afternoon. It's such a pleasure and a joy to be here back at Wellesley. I actually haven't returned to campus since I graduated in 2001. And it's such a special treat to be here to honor Professor Steady and to meet so many fabulous scholars and activists and thinkers from all over. I wanted to start with one of my favorite memories of Professor Steady, and it was actually on the dance floor. When I was a student here, there was something called IASA, the International African Students Association, which was a pan-African organization of African students from, supporters of Africa from different schools. And every year we held an annual conference. And after the conference, which was held at Wellesley, there was this fabulous party at Harvard. And so my brother, who was visiting it at the time, and I drove over to Harvard. We were on the dance floor, and who do we see walk in? Professor Steady. And she danced with us the whole entire night. I think it was about 2 o'clock. I looked over, and I saw my brother and her on the dance floor still. And we still laugh about that. He says hi, by the way. But it was just so nice to see, you see this very, playful but serious professor, but the fact that she was down to earth and just wanted to hang out with us and be a friend was really special. I came to Wellesley. My story begins in Lagos, Nigeria, where I grew up. I actually grew up right outside of Lagos on a poultry farm. And at the time, it was the largest poultry operation in Nigeria that was run by my late father, and my late grandfather. And my mother was actually an African-American woman from Chicago. She met my father in college, and they fell in love and moved to Nigeria and started a life and had me and my 3 siblings. So when we moved to the United States in the early 90s, it was always enforced in my house that there was no such thing as brain drain, that everything that we were here to do, whether it was education, whether it was an internship, whether it was, an event, somehow we were going to transfer that back to Nigeria. And I remember my father saying all the time at the dinner table, don't forget where you're from. You're just here temporarily, and please, please, please don't forget that. When I came to Wellesley, it was such a delight to be able to take classes on Africa. I mean, I had never been able to do that in my high school. And so immediately I signed up for Professor Steady's class. I took Professor Murphy's class, and Lidveen, who was here earlier. I just kept taking classes on Africa because I wanted to understand, the place where I was from and be able to go back and make the most of what I had learned here. And I remember my parents saying, why are you majoring in Africana Studies? What does this mean? And, I had to tell them, well, Africa's a very diverse place. There's so many countries to learn. It's not just this one singular field. And so I'm so glad I had that opportunity. I want to take a few minutes to talk about I won't say failure, but some mishaps or some difficult experiences I've had as I've grown my professional career primarily in Africa and now back in the United States. And I say that because I think you could read my bio and get the impression that I've just sort of, jumped from one thing to the next and it's been a smooth ride. It's actually been, part of my journey has been learning from failure and learning from experiences that have informed my thinking about feminism and leadership. So the first experience I had was when I graduated from Wellesley. The transition from school to the workforce was a difficult one. I struggled to find a job. And I remember Professor Steady really being so sweet and encouraging, even trying to connect me to some of her former colleagues in the UN. And I couldn't get a job. And so eventually I had to move home to Charlottesville, Virginia, where my mother was living and still lives. And I had to take a job at a store called Origins, which is now it's part of the Estee Lauder company. So here I am in Origins thinking every day, what am I doing with a BA in political science and Africana Studies selling beauty products? And I was really embarrassed to tell even my classmates from Wellesley. I didn't write to Professor Steady and tell her, guess what, where I'm working. But I stayed at Origins for, I think, probably like a good 2 years until I was able to get a job in Dakar, Senegal. And during those 2 years, I realized that was probably, well, now I look back on it and I realize it was probably one of the best experiences I've had. Working in retail, that was not something Wellesley had, I thought Wellesley had prepared me for. I actually came to appreciate my femininity. I realized I like makeup, I like fashion. And, for so long I thought, the image of a successful woman is not somebody who works in fashion and beauty. So fast forward a few years afterwards, I actually took a sabbatical from my job and enrolled in a course in Paris, and I studied fashion. And I've worked quite a bit with fashion entrepreneurs in Africa, which you can imagine is such an exciting industry right now in terms of job creation and all sorts of creative talent that you see emerging. So that was one experience that has really shaped the way I think about work and career. The second was when I took a job with an organization called the International Finance Corporation. It's part of the World Bank. It's the private sector arm that makes investments in companies. And I took this job shortly after I graduated from my graduate program. They moved me to South Africa, and there I was working for this big international organization. And I realized that I had not negotiated my salary well. And so I ended up on a contract that was just not paying me what I deserved. And when I started to speak to colleagues, especially my male colleagues, I realized that I hadn't negotiated, I hadn't stood my ground, and I wasn't earning what I deserved. That experience was difficult, but what it taught me was to make the most of a situation that wasn't always ideal, but to figure out how to make the most of it and to really rely on my entrepreneurial thinking that thankfully was cultivated because I grew up in an entrepreneurial family in a country, Nigeria, that's naturally very entrepreneurial. So because I wasn't very satisfied in that job and I wanted to get out, I was able to identify activities and all sorts of things that I could do to supplement my work and the fact that I was being underpaid in this illustrious international organization. I also learned about institutions and the limitations of institutions, especially for feminist thinkers, for change makers. I've done a lot with development organizations in Africa, and I have to say that most of the projects I've worked on, it's been hard to really see the impact, the real impact on people, most particularly women. And because I saw those limitations, I think I also began to think, okay, what structurally could I create what could I create structurally that was different from the institutions that I've worked in? And that's led me to create my own business, which, hasn't been easy. But realizing that institutions were not always the answer to the way I saw the world and what I saw in terms of change, I think was a big eye-opener for me. The last experience I had, which was more recent, was an experience that involved a fellowship program that I applied to a few years ago that's financed by Mo Ibrahim. Now, Mo Ibrahim, as many of you know, is a billionaire from Sudan, made his money in telecommunications, and now has an annual prize that he gives past presidents from African countries who actually leave office. But he also has a program for... yeah, that's another discussion. He also has a program for mid-career professionals, usually in their 30s and 40s. So I applied to this program, I got it, and it meant that I would now work at the African Development Bank as an assistant to the president of the bank. Now, if you know the African Development Bank well, it pretty much is like the United States of Africa. And, it's the most important development institution on the continent in terms of its financial might. So here I am in this role, and the biggest challenge I had was with other women. And what I have found, particularly working on the continent, is that ageism and barriers that other older women who I've worked with have been particularly challenging. In some cases, it's been easier to work with men in terms of getting access to opportunities. So what I learned in that situation is something that's called situational leadership. And many times, not just in this situation, I've had to, in a sense, divorce my thinking about leadership that I've learned at Wellesley and in the West, which tends to be very participatory and, focused on teamwork. When you work in institutions that have a lot of bureaucracy and there's just a lot of division, you almost need a more authoritarian style to your leadership. And I had to learn that working in an institution like that, where it felt like everybody was against you, and you couldn't necessarily deploy the teamwork and the style of leadership that you would in the United States. So I learned about adjusting my leadership style in different situations. So I don't have much time left, but those are just some of the experiences that have shaped my journey since Wellesley. I am so lucky to be back. I moved back to the United States 2 months ago to start a new job, the Smithsonian. It is like a dream job working in an arts museum. I hope you guys will come visit. But getting there involved breaking a lot of barriers, because believe it or not, the Museum of African Art, it's it's not a very diverse organization. There are not many women, and there are not many professionals from Africa. And in fact, Wellesley alums were with me all the way through the interview process. It was just beautiful. I mean, there's some women I've never met who I just called and said, I'll help you get through this interview. So I'm back in the US, in DC. I am just so delighted to be back at Wellesley. Professor Steady, I hope you do write a book about your experiences. Because I have a really dear friend, Jumoke, and her mother and Dr. Steady are good friends. So she always talks about her Auntie Filomina, and then talks about Auntie Filomina's son, who's an actor in New York. And there's just so many interesting stories about this mighty scholar and feminist who I think I really do hope you write a book, because there are not enough memoirs about African women leaders out there. So I just want to thank you again for your unconditional support over the years. It's meant so much. And I think the only way I can thank you is by giving this to somebody else. So you can count on me to pass this on to other women who come into my orbit. And I look forward to seeing you again and what you do in retirement. Thank you so much.
I believe it's important to know who's speaking to you. So I'm going to begin with a poem that I believe both tells you about who I am and also the influence of Africana feminism and Black women on my life. So this poem is called In the Dreams / of Our Ancestors. In my dreams, I greet my oldest ancestors in their custom, and it pleases them. And though their dark brown skin and hardened hands do not resemble my wintertime pallor or skin kept smooth by lotions, I see myself within their facial expressions and body language, just as they see themselves in mine. I am so happy to be home because we are. In my dreams, though our words loom indecipherable by language, our songs and dances tell our stories. The joy of our reunion, the despair of our severance, the unthinkable pain and horror caused by our alienation. Love radiates between us outside of rational comprehension from deep within our spirits. My ancient grandfather smiles mischievously, shakes his head wistfully, sighs a knowing sigh, holds me to him tight, as if to say, my dear little child, you're not crazy or foolish for loving my dark-skinned sons. You are rather most human. My ancient grandmother presses her forehead to mine, holds my face between her ancient hands, as if to say, we are not sending you away, little one. We are just sending you ahead, for invoking our memory even before you knew us or how to do so, to keep remembering us as you always have. My eyes squeeze shut tight to hold back disobedient tears, to fight the ending of a dream. We return to the present, looking back to the past, belly full of ancestral fire. My stranger's face belies my kinswoman's spirit, full of remembering, full of love. In the dawn, the call of birds will greet me. The ancient's phoenix will rise from the ashes, called forth by the Sankofa, who will fly forward looking back, hearkening with her songs, our forgotten stories and dreams of our ancestors. Full circle. So now you know a little about me. So what I'm supposed to do here today is share my reflections on how Africana feminism has shaped me both professionally and personally. And I think the first lesson is right there, that recognizing that there is this link between the personal and the political, as was said earlier today. And my story, even though I bring with me today a lot of people, many names, I'll name many more names I won't be able to. Many of them, most of them, Black women. But I have to start too with, first with my parents, who I believe gave me gifts that made me receptive from an early age to voices of people different from me. And I'm so thankful for that gift because it has brought me on a beautiful journey. My father always taught me to question why, especially of authority figures. There was a fuzzy line between elders and authority figures, but somehow he managed to encourage me to be respectful of elders, even though he allowed me to challenge him. But especially questioning governments and powerful forces. And my mother taught me that, not so much in words, but in action, that strangers are just friends you have not met yet, and to be greeted with love. I began my life in Japan. That's where I was born. That's where my family lived for the first 6 years of my life. And then we came here to the plantation, as I like to call it. And I say that because when you're young and you come to a place where the language that you're given to describe reality is white supremacist language, which invisibilizes the forces of oppression at work, historically and presently, it's very confusing to feel what you feel as a young person at the age of 6 coming here. And I felt a lot. I felt like I came to a messed up place. And I know now that I did. Thanks to my Wellesley education and listening to a lot of Black women, I know unequivocally I do. I know also that contrary to the either-or black-white thinking which is conferred upon us in this society, I know that two things can be possible at once. And although this can be a terrifying place, and there's so much wonderful and beautiful things that happen, there's so much resistance. We see it here in this room, we feel it in this room. So, but yeah, so this early childhood that I experienced moving from Japan to here and moving just with my nuclear family. We do have family in the United States, just with my nuclear family to a place in New Jersey where I believe, is this Professor Jeffries? Yes, we went to the same, all the schools, all the good schools that we went to that didn't teach us the things that I wanted to learn. So because of that, I spent a lot of time out in the streets, in the immigrant communities, full of people from Africa and the diaspora. And I became very quickly enamored with these communities, with the music, with the culture, with the dance, with the spirit, really. And so even though I didn't have words to describe everything that was going on, I began a journey of trying to understand, why would people leave these wonderful places to come to here? And and to understand the history and the economics that informed all of that. So that's how I ended up, after trying for a year not to go to college, because I had the word status quo in my vocabulary by the time I graduated high school, and I knew that as a white middle-class woman, going to college was perpetuating the status quo, and I didn't want to do that. But my father quickly convinced me after a year off, which was all the taste of the real world I knew I needed to realize, oh no, I love learning a lot. I'll go to Wellesley College. And so thankfully, I came here, I was able to study Africana Studies and International Relations, learned so much from Professor Steady, of course, Professor Murphy, Lidwin Captains, Toni Morrison as well. But Toni Martin, may he rest in peace, yes. Professor Cujo, Professor Florent, Professor Prabhu in the French department, Professor Obeng. And it's during this time, and I would be remiss not to mention Kara Washington, Dr. Kara Washington, who, although not a professor here, directed and still directs Yanvalu Drum and Dance Ensemble. And yes, snap it up. This is where sort of everything came together for me, where everything I was learning in my courses and in the lectures organized by these departments became embodied. And it's hard for me to pinpoint in which place, whether it was Professor Florent's course or Professor Obeng or in Yanvalu itself, but I began to understand the history of one of maybe the only real revolution in our recent history, the Haitian Revolution, which is really should be taught in all schools, should be discussed with our children from the very beginning, because if you understand this story, you understand the interconnected oppressions at force in the world ever since Europeans left with all their boats and did what they did. And so this is where I understood, yes, that voodoo, that these embodied spiritual practices of the New World, whether it's candomblé, whether it's santeria, were the forces that gave home to people who had been ripped apart from their communities and had been forced together with others who they didn't know, who looked like them, but maybe didn't speak the same language. Understanding that was very powerful for me, and then understanding that the Haitian Revolution began with a voodoo ceremony at Boyacaima was another piece for me. Because all along as I was trying to understand what was going on in this United States with all this inequality and this bad vibes on this plantation, I was also trying to understand myself. And the black and white thinking was still very much a play in my mind. It started, I remember, when I was in middle school, journaling, like, I feel like I've been born into a war and I've been born on a wrong side. And you can imagine, as a young person, without the language, without the constructs and schema in school to help make sense of that, and without, unfortunately, a peer group that was grappling with the same questions, I felt a lot of alienation, and I didn't feel good about myself in some ways. So fast forward to these understandings that I gained here at Wellesley College. Thank you. I eventually started to ask, I learned a lot also about compassion from Africana feminism and from Black women, and that the importance of grace. And so I began to look at, and also to understand myself not as an individual, but as the descendant of many ancestors, and as I became a mother at Wellesley College. These are my sons. They're no longer babies, Cheche and Amar. And that was also a very transformative experience. Well, anyway, many comments were made about motherhood and its importance, and I could not agree more. But so as I was kind of grappling with this duality of understanding more about the rest of the world, but feeling at odds with myself, over time, and through women like Leslie Salmon Jones, who's founded Afroflow Yoga, Maud Evans, Kara Washington herself, so many women, so many wonderful Black women who have come into my life. I start to piece together more understanding of myself, which in turn empowered me to be the social justice warrior that I am today. And I think one thing that's very important We cannot cast aside the categories of race in this present day as if they have no meaning, because their social construct is a powerful force, as we know. At the same time, embracing the truth that Africa is our ancestral home, that the majority of our ancestors, regardless of what we look like, were either living in Africa or even outside of the African continent, looked African up until very recently, relatively speaking, and behaved as Africans, and were matriarchal and were matrilineal. All of this understanding has been very healing to me, and I realized that, you're not one or the other, you're both, right? You're all of these things. So I want to just offer a couple of anecdotes about how being influenced by these wonderful women has shaped me as an educator. I'm working now with kids at the Mather Elementary School in Dorchester, which has a diverse population of students some from Vietnam, a lot from the African diaspora, or African Americans, Latinos, a smaller amount of white students. But this year, in the beginning of the year, as I was teaching them art, I had them make identity posters about who they were. And it was important to me that I held for them both their individuality but also our commonality. So I started by talking to them as artists about how they can, what they create sends energy into the world. And they have a choice about what kind of energy they want to send into the world. So I introduced them to the symbol of the Sankofa from the Akan people of Ghana, and I said, this means it's not bad to go back for what was taken from you or what you've forgotten. And so one thing I like to remind people, because a lot of us have forgotten, is that all of our ancestors are originally from Africa. And even even those ancestors that traveled outside of the continent and peopled the rest of the earth, when they got to those places, again, they stayed looking African, right? And I said to my Vietnamese children, okay, the Buddha, who is important in your spirituality, you can look and see the Bantu knots on the Buddha and know that even the Buddha had African roots. So I explain this to all the kids, and so this is just some of an example. And the fact is, they love it. The kids love it. They want to be connected. They want to understand what's going on. Like me, who came here as a 6-year-old, very confused. They want to understand what's going on. And when you explain to them in a way that they can understand, they love it, and they're hungry, and it gives them a hunger to learn more and to change what's going on. So I just want to end by saying, I know it's ironic at a panel about Africana feminism for a white woman to spend so much time talking about her own life, but I offer this story because it's the one I know best, my own story, and I offer it because I know that I could share deeply from it. And in sharing deeply, I hope that I give to you something that Black women have given to me, which is courage. And at the heart of courage is the word heart, cœur, heart. And when you think about it, the heart is like our closest connection. If you subscribe to the notion of heaven, heaven is described in the Bible as something that can't be described, neither ears have heard nor tongue confess. And the heart is the closest thing that enables us to have that experience as humans. And so I think about the centrality of the heart and love in the fight for justice and healing that we're all engaged in. And so in the words of my Haitian brothers and sisters, I'll leave you with a couple final words. L'union fait la force, strength and unity. Mais un pile chai pas lourd. With many hands, the load is light. And finally, a word I hear all the time, whether it's for the loss of a loved one or for everyday headaches, courage. Thank you.
It's been such a pleasure, such a privilege to have known and be a student of Professor Steady. And for full disclosure, she won't be able to get rid of me. So I was so in love with taking medical anthropology with Professor Steady. I think within the second class, I was suggesting to her that the course should become a two-semester course. And as soon as I said that, I started to look for books and articles for that second course. So I learned so much from Professor Steady. When she told me that she was leaving, she was going to retire, it really hit me like a brick. I'm still trying to wrap my head around her decision, even though I support her, but it's still really hard for me to accept. So focusing on this lack of acceptance, so I decided that, well, maybe she doesn't have to retire fully. So we talk quite often. And for anyone who is around me, I'm always working on a project, and I always need help. I'm always looking for partners and collaborators. So needless to say, I've had many projects that I have already proposed to Professor Steady for us to work on. So I don't think she will be fully retired, as much as if I can have a hand on that. So I am one of a Creole woman from Haiti. I left Haiti actually quite a long time ago. When I left when I was 13, I did not come here to the U.S. at first. I was sent to a private school, actually in Montreal, and where I lived for about 5 years. And then it was after leaving Montreal that Boston became my home since 1978. So, of course, it has been more than a privilege for me to have had the opportunity to study here at Wellesley College, where Wellesley became kind of like an extended family, my community, and then to have had Professor Steady and so many other amazing professors in my life. So the panel, or perhaps panels from this morning, spoke quite a bit about Professor's work around many things, including motherhood. And in my medical anthropology course, we also talked quite a bit about motherhood. Motherhood in terms of leadership, in terms of cultures, in terms of birth, and so many things. But also something that we talked a little bit about was not motherhood, but rather infertility. And so for anyone who knows about my background, which is focuses a lot on reproductive health, and primarily reproductive health issues and diseases of the reproductive system in women of African descent. So I had an interest to really fully look into infertility in Black women. So being in a course with Professor Steady and feeling that I have quite a pillar behind my back, so I chose to do a research to interview a group of infertile women. So let me tell you a little bit about this this research, which is so the title of my talk is A Racial Prism: An Analysis on the Impact of Infertility in Black Women. So again, keep in mind that I embarked on this major project. When the research was done, I think it was over 65 pages, because of, again, having behind my back the wind of, beneath my wing, someone like Professor Steady. So I went on to where I chose to do my presentation on the prevalence of infertility in Black women. So around 2012, guided by using a critical medical anthropology lens and applying the knowledge and confidence and emboldened by the audacity acquired from one of my favorite courses, Medical Anthropology with Professor Steady, I designed a small qualitative and anecdotal research to examine the impact of infertility in 16 Black women between the ages of 35 and 45. Originally, I wanted to do 30 women, but the fear of carpal tunnel syndrome and not going crazy held me back. So before addressing a medical anthropology lens, I would like to provide some background information about this topic. Women of all races and backgrounds struggle to become pregnant. However, most conversations and research studies on infertility primarily focus on wealthy white women. A given justification for this disparity states that typically only wealthy women actively seek treatment, or affordability of treatment can run tens of thousands of dollars. Other justification is that Black women are less likely than white women to seek medical help for infertility. So despite being disproportionately affected by infertility, few studies have examined general fertility or medical intervention in this racial group. We seldom hear any conversations or information about the significant health problem in Black women, whether in the US or other countries. Essentially, their struggles are often overlooked by the media, medical research, and perhaps in most academic communities. For the sake of this short presentation or talk, I will only focus on the US, and we'll attempt to partially address some of these issues. So the NIH defines infertility in women as the inability to get pregnant after at least 1 year of actively trying to conceive. And of course, and also the NIH defines infertility in women between the ages of 15 to 44. So, and the NIH also states that women who can become pregnant, but who cannot carry pregnancy to term, may also be considered infertile. So sometimes we may have a woman who gives birth to one child, but is unable to get pregnant for many other reasons. That person will be also considered infertile. How am I doing that? I hope.
You're good.
Oh, okay. So infertility has been recognized by the medical community as a disease. In 2009, the CDC reported that 10% of women in the United States between the ages of 15 and 44 have difficulty getting pregnant or staying pregnant. Thus, they would be considered medically infertile. According to the American Society of Reproductive Medicine, infertility affects men and women equally. And we know a lot of time when a woman cannot get pregnant, who gets blamed? And who gets questioned?
Women.
Yeah. So the NIH also reports that infertility has no single cause because successful pregnancy is a chain of events. Pregnancy requires that a woman's ovaries must be able to release a viable egg and be able to travel down the fallopian tube and be able to to the fallopian tube. The man must be able to ejaculate, and his sperm must be able to travel to the fallopian tube. The sperm and egg need to unite to fertilize the egg. The fertilized egg must implant in a receptive uterus and be nurtured by the body to allow the fetus to develop and grow until it's ready for birth. Problems at any of these stages can lead to infertility. The cause of infertility can rest with the woman or the man, and many arise from unknown factors or a combination of these. In some cases, environmental factors might contribute to infertility. In other cases, genetic conditions or other health problems may be the main cause. So dual reproductive technologies offer choices and hope to infertile individuals or couples who desire to become parents. With the help of advanced reproductive services, women who are unable to conceive can undergo in vitro fertilization, infertility and in other infertility treatments. So for the sake of time, I will skip a bit to kind of go back to say, but why did I choose to use a medical anthropology lens? Well, through the knowledge that I acquired being in Professor Steady's class, I thought that it would be important to use a humanistic feminism praxis from her guidance and leadership in order to really to look at issues around the biomedical model in women seeking IVF treatment. I also wanted to have, in my interviews with these women, I wanted to design a research that would look at issues that explore, the politics of healthcare coverage, politics of economic barriers, the politics, the geographic politics within a fertility clinics. How many I wanted to know how many of these black women, when going into a fertility clinic, how many faces did they see around that look anything like them, whether it was patients or staff from within those clinics. I also wanted to look at alternative treatment of ethno-medical model, from holistic herbal medicine to religious faith healing. Have I not taken a course such as medical anthropology with Professor Steady, and I was designing that research, I would not have thought of ethno-medical model. I would not have thought of holistic and herbal medicine. So much so that led me to interview a Haitian herbalist in Hyde Park, and who work with a lot of people who cannot access or have or afford IVF treatment, who see him. And I had a chance to also interview some of these women who had very good success using the herbal approaches that these men took. I learned so much from speaking with him, so much. It was just really amazing. So again, with the guidance and again, what I learned with in Professor Steady's class, my analytical insights, led to just many different interests to really talk about designing that research. The mandate, the motherhood mandate, what are the cultural issues, the family pressures that women have to deal with, issues around gender violence, victimization of these women, issues, people questioning these women's self-worth, kind of like seeing them as being deviant, for not being pregnant, letting down, communities, partners, families, community down. Can you imagine the stress of, it's already stressful if you cannot get pregnant, but to have all of these stressors as part of your life, you can just imagine how much that can also interfere. So it was, while it was a lot of work, but it was really an amazing project to undertake. And I give, my eternal gratitude to Professor Steady. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for everything that you have given us, for all the opportunities that you have provided. I felt that you have made the Africana Studies department a place for Sophie to come and rest. So, so I thank you so much. In Haitian Creole, I say to you, chapeau bas, hat off to you. I love you very dearly, and you will, I will keep you busy for quite a while.
I actually do want to read a tribute from an alum who was not able to be present, but really wanted to share something with Professor Steady. This is from Halima Hema Musa Diola from the class of 2010, which some of you may know. She's an incredible human being. So this is her writing. I remember landing into Wellesley and meeting Professor Steady at the Africana Studies department. Seeing her there made me believe that I would perhaps belong in a space that seemed so foreign. Over the years, Professor Steady has grown into a mentor that I have come to greatly admire, someone who has literally changed the course of my life. My senior year, we, WASA, hosted a fireside conversation with Professor Steady. It was one of the most unforgettable nights of my time at Wellesley. She talked to us about her journey, her dreams, her fears, and said that in every single one of us, she saw change and the future. I will never forget the generosity of spirit she exhibited. It was a harmonious mixture of mothering strength, intelligence, care, and kindness, one that will continue to define every single interaction I've had with Professor Steady. In a class, African Women Leadership, that I took my senior year, for the first time in my academic life, I felt I was going in search of myself, a foundation for where I am today as a PhD candidate at Cambridge. Professor Steady has written every single one of my recommendation letters for graduate schools. I got into all of them. When it came to apply for my PhD, I was secretly seeking excuses not to. She finished and sent the recommendation letter even before I submitted my proposal. So I had no choice but to apply. I love and cherish Professor Steady for the woman that she is and for the foundation she has been in the life stories of so many of us. Your presence has changed Wellesley. Your presence has changed academia. In my dissertation, I cite you and smile knowing that I've had the honor of growing under the shadow of a giant, a brilliant mind, a kind soul, unafraid to speak her truth and redefine paradigms. Professor Steady, you are retiring, but before you did like a Wangari, a warrior of Hausa, you have planted thousands of baobabs that will grow and grow. Thank you for your love. Thank you for standing up, Halima.
Hello everyone, my name is Chika Ibuzie. I'm a senior studying international relations history, and I'm from Nigeria and New York. In addition to the earlier comments, these are tributes from the alums of the Wellesley African Students Association. My roommates and I were relishing our early morning sleep on the first day of winter session 2013 in Jamaica, when the room phone rang at 6 a.m., and I answered it to the front desk informing us that our professor had requested an early wake-up call for us. Of course, we grumbled about the mandated hour, but that professor was none other than our beloved Professor Filomina Steady. And ordering that call was one of the many small things that she did amidst her great academic career, and that rendered her a model figure, especially to me and my fellow African students. Congratulations on your distinguished academic career, Professor Steady. May there be plenty of beaches in your future, Jamaican and otherwise. With all my admiration and respect, Sylvia Hiaku, class of 2013. Since graduating Wellesley, I regularly reflect on the diverse and feminist perspective through which many of our classes were taught. Especially initially an international relations major, I soon switched to Africana Studies after my first class with Professor Steady. As a Ghanaian American, the only history I knew about the continent was from the limited text on the transatlantic slave trade taught in American schools or Ghana's history shared by my family. Professor Steady expanded my understanding of African history across the continent through a sociological and anthropological framework. Furthermore, she pushed me to question the impact of international aid organizations on Africa's growth prospects and identify other models of growth. My sophomore year, I went with Professor Steady and a group of students on a winter session trip to Jamaica. I had previously viewed Jamaica as a premier vacation spot and hoped to Bob Marley. However, throughout the trip, Professor Steady and her Jamaican colleagues highlighted several ongoing cultural connections Jamaica had with Africa, particularly with Ghana. I left Jamaica feeling gratitude for the experiences and lessons learned. Steady always highlighted the linkages between the diaspora and the continent, our history, our present, and our future. Thank you so much, Professor Steady, for everything you have taught us. I am incredibly grateful. Christina Soa, class of 2011. My well wishes from East Africa for Professor Steady upon her retirement from Wellesley College. Professor Steady's contributions to Africana Studies and on women's studies are widely celebrated. I would like to add mention of her contribution to environmental studies as well. At Wellesley, she taught the only course available while I was there that focused on minoritized populations' interactions with the environment and environmental justice. This work may be less well known, but it has had a great impact at Wellesley among students and beyond the academic world, such as when we discussed Professor Steady's book, Environmental Justice in the New Millennium, with my activist collective, Decolonizing Environmentalism. For me, it is incredibly important to remember that the environment is core to the lives of Africana people and African and Africana women, contrary to popular stereotypes of our apathy towards environmental issues. Professor Steady served as one of my advisors for my individual major, but my own personal relationship with Professor Steady has grown after Wellesley College, testament to her continued care for her students even after they leave the institution. Thanks to Professor Steady, I have grown in my advocacy and activism self, for example, through advocating for the Africana Studies Department to retain a hiring position. I am delighted to wish Professor Steady all the very best in the new paths she is moving onto after her retirement. May the ancestors continue to hear you and see you as they have done throughout these years in academic life. In power and gratitude. Wangui Wa Kamunji, class of 2013. I often find myself being called on at work and elsewhere from my African gender perspective, and I claim no rights to such expertise, only great tutelage from our great Professor Steady, which spurred me on to know and experience more. Taking her African Women and Economic Empowerment class, sorry if I butchered the name, it's almost been a decade if not, was transforming to say the least. Today you hear, bring your authentic self to work, being bandied about as an empowerment tool for women. But our dear Professor Steady has been living this for decades. Your classes were always fun, grounded in robust and novel theory, great discussions, fostered by you and a wealth of unparalleled real-life experience. Your alluring smile and confidence only just added to the mix. A lot of who I am today and what I do can be traced to what I learned from you. I took 3 classes with you, which is 1/8 of all the knowledge I gained. Though I wish I drew closer to you, in my mind, you modeled what I wanted to become, and I hope I'm well on my way there. Thanks for inspiring a new generation of young African women, change makers, and leaders who will make sure we have a seat at a table, and who will speak with knowledge and confidence, thanks to your excellent lessons, and hopefully continue to build on the great work you've done. From before Beijing to Beijing itself, and afterwards, your myriad other contributions to academia and international development in general. All the best in retirement, praying for a time of relaxation, family bonding, and hopefully interspersed with you still sharing your wisdom. Love, Maureen Botoisio, class of 2012. It was an honor working with you, Professor Steady, for the entire 2015 to 2016 school year. I have very fond memories of our weekly, bi-weekly talks in your office. You allowed me to realize I was doubting my abilities and could actually do whatever I put my mind to. To realize no matter how large of a project. Thank you for believing in me when no one else did in that particular moment. It is a testament to your devotion to the work's needs and realities of African women. It was a pleasure seeing you again during the Wellesley's first ever African Women's Leadership Conference last spring, and I will hopefully be in your presence sometime soon. Cindy Kofi, class of 2016. My experiences with Professor Steady shine bright. Professor Steady's classes were not only informative, but they were inspirational as they helped me to deepen and cement my journey into being a learner and an advocate for the African diaspora. Professor Steady taught her classes with passion and brought a unique perspective. She had an intersectional approach to the coursework she taught, and students from a variety of disciplines could find something to take away from the subject material. In fact, some of the books and articles that were discussed in those classes can be found on the bookshelves in my home. In addition to being one of my professors, Professor Steady was an advisor and mentor. She was very understanding and about the difficulties that can arise for some students as they navigate through tough academic schedules with the rest of their lives. She gave wonderful advice for my work and supported me as a student. One of the most memorable moments with Professor Steady is her taking me, among other students, to a winter session in Jamaica. The Jamaican trip had a profound impact on me. I hold on to the memories because I learned so much, got to deepen some friendships that I hold dear and near today, and I got to travel throughout the country. I am so thankful for my time with Professor Steady. I wish her well in her next steps as she embarks on retirement. With love, Aqua Foucault Sekere, class of 2013. Dear Professor Steady, thank you for being a role model to me and to so many others. When I came to Wellesley as a young African girl in 2005, it was comforting and inspiring to find an African woman who was so brilliant, published, and accomplished, who had done her PhD at Oxford, and who was from the continent, the motherland itself, from Sierra Leone. Within the first few years of me taking your class, Third World Urbanization, African 204 in fall 2005, I knew that I too could one day be a professor, author, researcher, teacher, and woman of great repute, if I put my mind to it, because you had proved that it was possible. I admired your poise and brilliance, and your vast and deep knowledge of socioeconomic issues affecting the developing world and developed world. In my junior year, fall 2008, I took your course, Environmental Justice, Race and Sustainability, Africana 226. I was prior to that particularly not drawn to issues around the environment and sustainability. I always thought these to be too technical and topics that I was too green in, pun intended. But I took the course for two reasons. One, to find a connection between those three factors as alluded to by the course title. And two, to sit under your tutelage so I can keep learning because I had been so inspired by you already. I learned in that course much more about the world that we live in and the layers of inequalities, both in rural and urban, developing and developed worlds that I had expected. More importantly, I learned the actions that we could take as individuals, governments, countries, and collectively as humans to right some of the wrongs in terms of the environmental degradation, segregation, race, justice, and sustainability. In January 2007, I was one of the lucky women who went to Jamaica with you for the Heritage and Culture for Jamaica Winter Session Class Africana 300 in partnership with the University of West Indies. What a profound, deep, unforgettable, eye-opening, enjoyable trip that was. You helped us see and think about the different nuances of not just the diaspora of African people, but about the heritage of Jamaica and its people. What a profound, deep, unforgettable, eye-opening, enjoyable trip that was. You helped us to see and think about the different nuances of not just the heritage and culture of Jamaica and its people, but also of the larger Caribbean people and diaspora Africana people. I took keen interest in the maroons of Jamaica, and through your guidance, wrote a research paper that earned me a solid A, a paper which to date I am proud of because of what I learned firsthand from the locals as well as through secondary research. I thank you because of the amazing courses offered in the Africana Studies department, while you were a member of and at some point for long while you were heading it. I took course after course till I actually became a double major, International Relations and Africana Studies. I did my honors thesis with Africana department under the guidance of the super wise Professor Pashentino Bang and the incredibly brilliant Professor Lidwin Captains of History department. The combination of history classes with Professor Captains tackling pre-colonial and Post-Colonial Africa, The Making of the Modern World Order, plus courses like African Film and African Religions with Pash, and then economics, political science courses, African literature with Professor Sluin Kujo, and the introduction of Swahili as a language in the department. All of this made my 4 years at Wellesley a journey of growth, far away from home yet very much at home. I was so happy and blessed, and I am forever thankful to have been at Wellesley at such a time. In my participation and leadership in Slater and WASA, Wellesley African Students Association, I also got to know you as a great supporter and mentor. You attended our events and helped us to think through what we were doing and how we could do it effectively. I remember the Black Womanhood Symposium in 2008, held by the Art, Film, and Africana Studies Department. Being involved in the symposium, incorporating it into the Mama Land show, taking part in a panel discussion as a speaker, these will forever remain one of my greatest joys in my life. Professor Steady, as you retire, I want you to know that you are a hero. You made us believe in ourselves. You made us think deeper truths. You made us strive for excellence in our studies, and all around because you yourself exemplified it. I remember meeting your husband too and admiring your friendship and camaraderie. I thank you for the many battles you must have fought valiantly and quietly in the background to keep the Africana Studies alive, relevant and thriving, giving us all a voice. I thank you for your grace, wisdom, kindness, and mentorship and friendship. I thank you because you wrote me recommendations for a summer program. Back in Kenya since 2011, I am now doing my master's at the African Women's Studies Center, AWSC, in the University of Nairobi, under the director of the AWSC, Professor Wajiku Kabira. I'm sure you know her. And Dr. Lino Maloi. And one day in class, guess what quote came up? It was a quote by you on African feminism. I got tears in my eyes seeing your name projected on a university screen all the way here in Nairobi, and knowing that I had met you and sat at your feet in real life. Of course, I made sure that our lecturers and whole class knew that you had been my professor in real life. Please, modesty for who? I really wish I could have been there for your farewell event, but as you know, Kenya is rather far. But I hope you get to hear and read this tribute, as it is deep and straight from the heart. I wish you the very best in your next steps. Do professors really retire? I don't think so. May God bless you and your family. On my end, I have 2 little children. Professor, a little boy who is 6 and a little girl who's 4. They're amazing kids, so full of life, curious, playful, and very loving, as all children are, I think. Their father is an equally amazing human, and I am so grateful for them all. My mother and the rest of the family are well too. You met my mom at the graduation in spring 2009. But I don't know if you would remember her, as I am sure you've met many parents over the years, but she remembers you. Bye again, Professor Steady. Congratulations. Thank you for everything, and God bless you. With all my love, respect, gratitude, and best wishes for a wonderful retirement, your student, Elishaba Metsengeti Period, class of 2009. Thank you.